So today I'm going to interview my mom on the events of 9/11 for my history project. Let's get started. First question is, where were you when the attack on 9/11 took place, and what were your initial thoughts?
I was at work, and I was actually pregnant at the time. You weren't born yet. And I work in a claims department where we didn't really have access to the internet or the news. And Daddy also worked at Aflac at the time. He worked in the call center. And one of our employees was listening to the radio news with their headphones. And they said, there's breaking news, a plane just flew into one of the World Trade Center towers. And at first we thought it was a small plane, it was an accident. We thought maybe, it was a kit plane or just a private plane that either ran out of gas or had mechanical failure, and it was not intentional. But just to find out, we went to the gym on site. My work has a gym, and the gym has televisions all around the room so people can watch TV while they walk on the treadmill. And at that point, we could see live footage of one of the towers where the plane had flown through, and there was a big hole, and it was a fiery, scene, but the building was still intact at that point, and the other building had not even been hit. So Daddy met me in the gym, and we were both watching on the screen, trying to figure out what happened, how did this happen? And after watching for a few minutes, we could see the second plane coming into the second tower on live TV, and at that point you could see that it was a jet and that it intentionally crashed into the building. And it was very sad to watch. I mean, you knew that people were dying at that point, and the buildings were both on fire. They were still standing, but they were both on fire. And shortly after that, we got word that a plane had hit the Pentagon. And then after that, there was word that another plane had been hijacked, and it was headed toward DC, which we later found out that the passengers on the plane were able to communicate with some of their loved ones on the ground and found out what was happening all around, with the tower attack and with the Pentagon attack, and they knew that they were probably headed for some landmark in Washington, D.C. So those passengers were able to overtake the terrorists and end up crashing the plane somewhere else. So we don't even know where they were headed. But I just remember when it first happened, we didn't know what to think. We didn't know if this was a foreign government that was attacking the U.S. We didn't know if we were, there was some kind of war being started. We didn't know if nuclear weapons were headed our way. I mean, everybody was fearful about the president's safety. And because these things happen, like 20 minutes later, 15 minutes later, we just didn't know if there were more attacks coming throughout the day. And it was very scary. I just remember thinking, gosh, is this the end of the world? I mean, what's happening to America? You didn't know how you could be safe or where you could go to be safe. And I just remember standing there with Daddy, being pregnant, thinking a child is going to be born in this violent age that we're living in, and how scary that is, and just wanting to go home. We did end up working the rest of the day, but it was a very sad, somber day.
It must have been terrifying. Yes. All right, the next question is, what images impacted you the most?
While we were watching everything unfold, we missed the first plane go through. We just picked up from that first incident. But while we were watching on live TV and the second plane went through and both buildings were on fire, you could see people, I guess they were at the top floors, that there was no way they could get down. I mean, the way for them to get down involved those center parts of the building that were hit. So they were basically trapped in a fire. And the saddest part to me was seeing people jumping out of the building because they would rather jump to their deaths and have a quick death than be burned alive. And some of them were holding hands as they jumped out of the building, and you just felt so helpless helpless because we were watching it on TV. And it's like there's nothing you can do. I mean, these were young people, you know, probably younger than I was at the time. And they went to work thinking it's going to be a normal day. And they end up having to jump out of a building to escape being burned alive. And then shortly after that, you know, we're thinking any minute there's going to be rescue teams, there's going to be fire trucks, there's going to be people helping. And the next thing you know, the two buildings just collapsed to the ground. And you saw all that on TV, live. And at that point, you realized that if there was anyone else in the building, they didn't make it.
Okay. The next question is, describe the tone of the country and what things were like in the aftermath.
In the first days afterwards, people were terrified. I mean, again, we didn't know who was doing this, why they were doing it, if more attacks were coming. People didn't want to fly. I mean, for a few days, I think, all the flights in and out of the country were canceled as a safety measure. But even after they started up again, people were terrified of getting on a plane. And you know, then there was talk of airlines going bankrupt and the economy getting hurt. And you could see in the days afterwards on TV, people going to Ground Zero to clean up the rubble and some of the personal effects that were there on the ground, you know, people's wallets with pictures of their children, just stuff like that. But there was a lot of fear in the country, just not knowing what to expect and, you know, how to regain a sense of safety.
It must have been horrible just to happen out of nowhere, you not know what's going on, and just find out that all the people died pretty much except for a few.
Thousands.
My last question is, what good things, if possible, came out of this tragedy?
I remember after it happened, there was a lot of people coming to church. I mean, even at our church, we saw more people than usual because people were scared. I mean, they were uncertain about the safety of the country, about their future. Another thing I remember is, you know, all the touching stories of some of the rescuers, some of the firefighters and the policemen that survived, you know, saving people, and then others who died saving people. And the fact that they were willing to risk their lives to do whatever it took to bring more people to safety. I remember, you know, there was a lot of unity in the country. We had just had a political election, you know, the year before, not even a year before. And there was a lot of division in the country, you know, between Republicans and Democrats, and there were a lot of people who were unhappy with the president. And I remember after he went to Ground Zero and tried to assure Americans that we were going to move on, we were going to recover from this, we were going to rebuild, there was hope for the future, you know, we could make it. That type of inspirational, motivational speech coming from the president really united the country, and there was this tremendous surge of patriotism. And you know, there were people putting American flags on their cars. There was American flags in almost any house on the street. You would see the flags hanging down. People were singing, you know, patriotic songs about proud to be an American. And like I said, you just saw the best come out in people. There were volunteers from schools and from, you know, business people who would take their week vacation that they normally would go to the beach or Cabo or somewhere, and they would take that vacation time to go to Ground Zero to help clean up. And it was just amazing to see people come together and see people, you know, once again believing in their country and believing in America.
That's great. Well, I mean, it was a horrible tragedy, but I mean, at least there was some good that came out of it. Uniting our nation and coming together as one to help better the nation. Alright, well that's the end of all my interview questions.
Okay.
And thank you for
Thank
your
you.
help, Mom.
Okay.